You cannot write a more tragic story. It's impossible, technically. Why? Well, because it's a story of the aggregation of everything that people are afraid of. You see death, you see destruction, pain, terror, tyranny, frailty, betrayal. Look harder, look harder, look harder. What do you see? The death and resurrection. You look far enough into the abyss, you see the light.
Hi, I'm Glenn from Speak Life. We like to see all things through the lens of Jesus. In fact, we like to see all things through the lens of Easter, because I think Easter actually explains the world that we all live in. Whether you're a Christian or not, whether you've ever set foot inside a church or clapped eyes on a Bible or not, you are living into an Easter kind of reality. But living into that reality doesn't make sense if the true Easter story is not your foundation. That's the point of this series, Easter is for Everyone. It's based on our spoken word video called Easter is for Atheists. You can check that out, where we talk about this Caravaggio painting, the incredulity of St. Thomas, and we press into what it is that makes Thomas believe. Thomas gets an experience of the risen Jesus, and he gets to see his hands and side, and he says, "My Lord and my God." But what would it take for you to believe? One thing you can do is open up the scriptures, open up John's Gospel, where the story of Thomas is written, and you can encounter who Jesus is. Another thing you can do is look out at the world through the spectacles of Jesus, through the lens of Jesus, and you can see that everything is actually Easter-shaped. Everything is about death and resurrection. In our series, we're talking about 4 different things. We're talking about redemption, relationships, recovery, and reality. All of reality has a shape to it that is very death and resurrection. In this video, we're talking about recovery, and I mean that in a kind of a psychological sense. Have you heard people like Jonathan Haidt or perhaps Jordan Peterson talk about the ways in which you confront your fears? Jordan Peterson on Joe Rogan speaks about this in a really powerful way.
Here's a doctrine from all fields of psychotherapy.
Okay.
Look at what you're terrified of, and you will get braver. So the classic therapeutic treatment for terror and the poisoning that terror induces is exposure, voluntary exposure.
Yeah.
Okay, so the pattern there is face what you're most afraid of, and
Right.
you will be free.
Okay. That makes sense.
Voluntarily.
Yeah.
Now that's a doctrine of psychotherapy now.
There's a fascinating verse in 1 Peter chapter 3 where it talks about giving way to fear. We are meant to do what is right and don't give way to fear. That's because fear is always trying to take ground from you. And you need to kind of forthrightly contend against that fear, push back against that fear, and enter into something that feels incredibly scary and impossible to do. But on the far side of that fear, you find freedom and rest and peace and psychological well-being. You go through a death and a resurrection. And so Jordan Peterson goes on to talk about the crucifixion as a limit story, an unimprovable story in which all the fears of all people in all times and all the horrors of all people in all times are kind of concentrated down like a magnifying lens, kind of sharpening the rays of the sun to a single point and burning into a single figure. And the story encapsulates everything that is most fearful, that is most horrific about human life. That's what the Easter story really is.
You cannot write a more tragic story. It's impossible, technically. Why? Well, because it's a story of the aggregation of everything that people are afraid of. So there was no death more painful than crucifixion. That's why the Romans invented it. It was to punish political miscreants. It was the slow, agonizing death by suffocation, essentially, and dehydration and exposure. It's extraordinarily painful. Okay, so that sucks. That's pain, man. Plus, you know it's coming. That's part of the story. Plus, your best friend betrayed you into it. Plus, your people turned against you. Plus, they're led by a tyrant who doubts truth. Plus, you're a victim of the Roman Empire. Plus, you're completely innocent. Plus, everybody knows it. Plus, they choose a criminal to be released from this experience instead of you, even though they know he's a criminal and they know you're innocent. So, and you're young. And you've done no wrong. And all you've done is help people. So it's a limit story. Okay, so then you think, we've been looking at that limit story for 2,000 years in the image and in the story. What are we doing? Well, you're supposed to visit the stations of the cross, let's say. Okay, here's the idea. You hear the crucifixion story and you play with it. Who are you? Maybe if you're female, you're Mary, and why is that? It's the Pieta. because you have to offer your children to the destruction of the world. That's female courage. That's the mother that doesn't hold her child back. It's like, go out to what? Eventually your death and destruction. Go out. Leave me. Be in the world. That's feminine courage, man, to let her baby go. You're Pilate. You doubt truth, but you'll go along with the crowd. You're Judas because you betray your best friend. You're the mob. You're the criminal. All of that, that's you. You look on all those things that you hate and are terrified by. That's not a snake. It's like the worst of all possible snakes everywhere. That's what you're looking at. And what do you see? You see death, you see destruction, pain, terror, tyranny, frailty, betrayal. Look harder. Look harder. Look harder. What do you see? The death and resurrection. You look far enough into the abyss, you see the light.
That is one of the more powerful proclamations of the death and resurrection that you will see by a man who's not a Christian, but he is grasping one aspect of the Easter pattern, and the Easter pattern is you go down and up. You face the horrific and you come through to peace. You face the fear and you come through to a sense of security and confidence. And it's written into the way you and I tick. If we shrink back and shrink back and shrink back from what we are meant to do in life, then the fears only increase and we only decrease. And that's hell. That's hell. It is ever increasing disconnection and dislocation and shrinking, and it's the opposite of life. It is perishing. And what is the gospel? Christ comes and he takes all those fears on himself. He takes hell on himself and rises up again. And he just says, look and live, look and live. Be identified with this Jesus. What are you afraid of? Jesus is not just the solution to that. He has suffered that and come out the other side. And you can trust him on the far side of all that horror, of all that fear, of all that hell. And that is the story that has given courage to billions around the world and down through history who have now been able to contend forthrightly with the littler fears in their life. With Christ, who has taken on all the existential fears, we are now able to, with his resurrection strength, take on the littler fears in our life and be strengthened for the road. Easter is not just a limited little story. Long ago and far away, it is woven into the warp and woof of life. And you either lean into that Easter story or you diminish. You shrink back. And as a Christian, I would just urge you to lean into that story and find that surrounding that story, undergirding that story, is the truth of Jesus, the Son of God, who has taken on those fears, who has taken on those horrors, who has taken on hell for you and risen up again to give you freedom and peace and recovery. So that's one of the 4 R's that we're looking at in this little mini-series. Easter is for everyone, and it explains everything. It explains redemption, relationships, recovery, and we've got a final video to come. It explains reality. The shape of the reality that you live in is shaped by Easter. We'll tell you about that one on the next video. But before then, would you like to do 3, 2, 1? It's a way of understanding life according to Jesus. You can binge it in a couple of hours. You can do it over 8 sessions. Just log in at 321course.com, start an account. It's totally free. We won't spam you. But we think you will find healing and wholeness and hope when you look at life according to Jesus. That'll do us for this video. Do check out Easter is for Atheists. Do check out the other videos in the Easter is for Everyone series. And if you've made it this far in the video, it's surely worth a like. And if you're not subscribed, why don't you subscribe now? And we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks.